And, as I said before, Nicolas Cage, he truly comes across as a monster in this movie. Perfectly unhinged, frightening, and always mysterious. The movie just peels back the fleshy folds of his motivations, of his desires as it goes along. So let's go ahead and move on to my review for the horror film Longlegs. So I would say 2024 has been fairly a good year for horror movies so far. We've gotten some great stuff like the Neolithic survival horror film Out of Darkness. Highly recommend people check that out when they have the time. The shockingly great prequel sequel, The First Omen. I had so many misgivings about that movie, and it ended up being one of my favorite films of 2024 so far. And also what I consider to be just one of the best movies of the year overall, Late Night with the Devil, which features a fantastic performance by David Dastmalchian. It's like, yes, we've also gotten a lot of crap like Night Swim, Imaginary, The Watchers more recently. But I'm happy to say that I've seen more good or great horror films this year than bad ones. And there's other great to good horror movies that I've also seen as well. Stuff like Abigail, of course. And a film that quickly became, one of my most anticipated movies, thanks in part to its pretty stellar marketing campaign, Longlegs. Just as an aside, we were talking about this before the review. We've gotten a lot of trailers this year. I mean, for years, really. But for this year in particular, that have just given away too much stuff that's in the film itself. I would argue that was certainly the case with a movie like Abigail. Though I still really enjoyed that film, the trailers just showed way too much. Whoever did the trailers and marketing for Longlegs, whoever the Neon hired to do this, they should do the trailers and marketing for all major film campaigns. I appreciated just how mysterious the trailers were for this movie, but also just how cautious and sometimes reserved they were in terms of just not revealing too much. We need more of that in film trailers, especially when it comes to horror and mystery movies. You don't want to give away all the scares. You don't want to give away all the twists and turns before the audience even goes and sits down and watches the movie. It doesn't make any sense. And so the way they handled that was absolutely fantastic, and they deserve a lot of praise. But, I digress. Longlegs is a movie I've been looking forward to, and there's been a lot of hype around this project. It's directed and written by Osgood Perkins, the son of Anthony Perkins, who, of course, played one of the most iconic serial killers in cinematic history, Norman Bates, in Alfred Hitchcock's seminal film, Psycho, a movie that's often looked at as starting the slasher subgenre, at least being one of the first films to help establish the slasher subgenre. And the film itself, Longlegs, it has a great cast featuring, genre star Micah Monroe, such movies as The Guest, one of my personal favorites, and It Follows, of course. She plays an FBI agent in the film, and Nicolas Cage, who plays a serial killer, which is great casting. Like, all of that sounds great, right? Now, there is so much hype around this movie, and a lot of early word of mouth, it's just been kind of calling it one of the greatest horror films of all time, comparing it favorably to movies like David Fincher's Zodiac. Even saying it's a modern Silence of the Lambs, a movie I would argue is one of the defining films of the 1990s, and one of the greatest horror films probably of the last century. So people saying that, I think it's a very loaded statement to make. And I think you can definitely draw comparisons to movies like Zodiac, Silence of the Lambs, hell, even Psycho. But I just want to judge it on its own merits, its own story of this young FBI agent trying to track down this infamous serial killer with strange ties to the occult. We can make grand comparisons at some other point. I want to sit with the movie for a little while before I start making those kind of comparisons. Now, what I'm very happy to say as of right now is that this is a great horror film. A great horror film that features an intriguing mystery, a very creepy atmosphere, and strong performances, particularly Nicolas Cage, who I think gives his best performance since Pig, which was one of my favorite films from 2021. Matter of fact, it probably was my favorite movie from 2021. The movie is set primarily in the 1990s, specifically in the state of Oregon. And though the movie's actually shot in Canada, as most movies are nowadays, it seems, the location that is created for the film's setting is absolutely perfect. Longlegs, on a technical level, is a gorgeous and grotesque movie in the best way possible. The cinematography just enhances the film's atmosphere and makes so many scenes incredibly tense and very disturbing. You have just these multiple moments in the film where you have these low camera angles in the movie that just reduce what you see and what you can't see, just adding to the film's overall creepiness. It makes you almost feel claustrophobic at moments. And it's complemented by a score that is extremely eerie, kind of already adding to the creepy cinematography, and the sound design is disturbing and at times even disorienting in the best way possible. It makes you feel uncomfortable and tense. And these things in turn elevate the performances throughout the movie. Now, you have a great cast of actors in this movie who are tasked with doing a number of gut-churning stuff, right? And I don't want to go into too much detail about what they all do or even are, since they're involved in some really disturbing moments. And, there's a lot of, twists and turns and spoilers. But rest assured, the supporting cast, I think, does a great job throughout this movie for what they're given. But it's the two leads of Micah Monroe and Nicolas Cage who really stood out to me. Monroe's character, who is this FBI agent, Lee Harker, I think that's her name, Lee Harker. She's at first, as we're introduced to her, she's fairly standoffish, even awkward around people initially. And the film provides a reason as to why that is. She's not your ordinary agent, not your ordinary FBI investigator. But it makes her well suited to track down this sadistic serial killer with strange ties to the occult and the devil. She comes off as stoic at times, though there are quite a few times where she's kind of quirky, odd, weird. But it works in this very surreal world that's just filled with disturbing imagery and sounds and cinematography, how they present certain things. It's is this even real, or am I just seeing this through the perception of this character, because of what they've gone through, how traumatized they are. It's stuff like that. And I think it really works. And her performance, I think, is very good throughout the entire film. And, as I said before, Nicolas Cage, he gives probably the best performance of his career since Pig in this movie. As we know, Cage has proven himself time and time again that he can play extremely weird and twisted characters. And Longlegs is going to go down, I think, is one of his best and best performances just overall. And it's a performance that I think is very deserving of award recognition. He truly comes across as a monster in this movie. Perfectly unhinged, frightening, and always mysterious. You know, the movie just peels back the fleshy folds of his motivations, of his desires, as it goes along. You know, like the marketing, the film hides him in a unique way thanks to the cinematography. But that just adds to the tension and terror his character brings throughout the film. You know, it might be too weird, too gross, too zany for some, but as, someone who has just really liked Cage, going kind of all in on these smaller indie projects recently, it really worked for me. And like anytime that he pops up in the movie, you're instantaneously captivated by him. Now, I can also see this film not being for everyone. It starts out as your typical procedural, right? Like a Silence of the Lambs, if you will. But it devolves into something else later, or when we really start to lean into the occult aspects. It wraps up and explains many aspects, aside from maybe like one certain thing towards the end as well, which I think could be seen as frustrating for a number of viewers. If I have any like specific complaints about the film, the last third does have two moments where we get an exposition dump. We need to know this information, of course, to understand everything else. But I just wish Perkins found a more interesting way to show it instead of just telling it. He kind of breaks the rule of show, don't tell, right? But despite that complaint, I think this is a great horror film. That features very impressive direction, cinematography, and sound. And again, it's also bolstered by really great performances, particularly from Monroe and Cage. Cage, who I think just gives you all the ick you could ask for in a serial killer movie. Will it be an all-time classic like Silence of the Lambs? I think that might be asking too much of it at that point. I simply think it's a great movie. It's a really good horror film, and personally one of my favorites so far this year. I think it's necessary to set people's expectations going in. And I do feel like this just kind of huge groundswell support, which is great. If you're excited for the movie, be excited for the movie. Of course, I was excited for the movie. Obviously, I ended up really enjoying it, really liking it. With, again, some, small issues, some criticisms. But yeah, some people saying that when you start comparing like any new film to like all-time classics, some of the, again, movies that one would argue are represent the best of cinema in general, or a particular genre, I think then you're opening yourself up to disappointment and possibly overhyping other people and setting them up for disappointment as well. And so I think this movie is great. I think it has a lot of great things working for it. I think it struggles a little bit in the last third of some of the unnecessary exposition. Well, necessary exposition that could have been shown in a more entertaining way. Despite that, I still think it's a great film and one of my favorite horror movies this year, and just one of my favorite movies in general for 2024. But I'm actually very curious to hear from you guys. I know a lot of you guys were talking about before I started this particular review that you're all jazzed about seeing it. I know some of you have seen it as well, so I'm very curious to hear your thoughts and your perspectives on this, very anticipated movie. A movie that looks like it could be a huge commercial success for Neon. There were a ton of people in my audience for this film, and I was actually very surprised. I thought it was going to be like one of those smaller films, like it makes a little bit of money, they'll make however much it does, and then it'll go to the theater, and then it'll be praised and stuff. But there's a lot of fucking people in my audience, so I think this might be pretty decent commercial success. But again, I digress. Very curious to hear your guys' thoughts as well.
5 minutes later.
What about you, chat? I'm very curious to hear your thoughts on Longlegs. What did you think? Bravo needs bacon. I like that. That's a good name. Thank you for the biddy. Appreciate it. Scariest movie Oz Perkins was ever Quigley with Gary Busey. I've not seen that. Space Cowboy says, yeah, this well-directed. Yeah, the movie is incredibly well-directed. Very well-directed. There's so many fantastic shots. A lot of, like, just creepy, just, like, asymmetry throughout it. So often while watching the film, I started just kind of, like, looking behind characters to see if there was, like, something else there, some creepy imagery. And because so often there'd be other times where there would be something behind them. But it kind of made my brain to think in that way. And so in turn, I just started to really appreciate the camera work and just how they just shot it overall. It was great. So yeah, completely agree. Ace Rock, good to have you. You're a serial juicer. You know, I am definitely a serial juicer. No question about it. I'm all about that juice, baby. Even when he's supposed to be a normal ass, a nerd in Iraq, he still seems insane. Yeah, he's fucking Looney Tunes in this movie. Bugstaff, real curious about this. Been hearing lots of praise. I really liked it. I really liked the film. I think it was great. Like, again, a couple criticisms towards the end, but overall, I thought it was very good. Heard it compared to everything from Silence of the Lambs and Seven, which I love, to Zodiac, which I'm not that big on. Yeah, no, there's a lot of. I compared it to Zodiac. There's a lot of Fincher in there too. Yeah, Seven, definitely. I think you might end up really liking this movie, Chris. There's one aspect I don't want to talk too much about because I think it spoils a kind of a big surprise in the back half of the film. And I could see a lot of people going like, oh, I'm all on board for this, what they're doing. And some other people going like, oh, I kind of dislike that you did that. You know, I think it just depends on what you like from a lot of horror films. And like for me, I went with it and I kind of embraced it and it worked. And again, I don't want to say too much because it would give something away because it's not really emphasized in the marketing all that much. So that's all I'll say. Hamilton, am I going to see Fly Me to the Moon this weekend? Probably not. If I still need to see Maxine. I still need to check out Maxine. I wasn't really a fan of the trailer for Fly Me to the Moon, to be perfectly honest. I was kind of turned off by it. But if I'm ever going to see another film this week, it'll be Maxine. Expect to be their highest grossing movie ever. There you go. Effective marketing campaign. Not surprised because there was a good amount of people in my audience. Cisco, I guess I kind of liked it. I can't be curious as to what was going on, but when things started to come together, it kind of lost me. I don't want to give anything away. I'm glad it seems like it'll be a success. Quigley was a movie Red Letter Media. I'm not familiar with it. Let's see here. The way you're describing this reminds me of It Files, where you're looking over the screen to try and spot the creature. There's a little bit of that. Dylan Murray, I'll do well. Talks of a sequel will begin and fall apart. Really? To this? Huh. Somehow end up becoming a Blumhouse production with Jeff Wadlow. I hope. Oh, you're joking. I thought you were being serious. I thought you're like, oh shit, they're talking about another one. I'm like, well, I mean, I don't really see how they could do that. But okay, you're being facetious. I mean, it was pretty good, honestly. Nice. And in Wiki, I thought the uses of wide shots of characters always being the center of the screen made you uncomfortable and anxious. And throughout, I also thought the jump scares of the score, their use as transitions were very effective and personally got me pretty much every time. Yeah, no, agreed. Yeah, good point bringing that up with the center of the screen. Like that. Comfortable and anxious throughout, yeah. All things like the Jeff. Well, I hope not. But yeah. Yeah, Chad, I really like the movie. I recommend it. Again, I set your I really wish you didn't have all these people just going in like, this is the next Silence of the Lambs. Like, don't do that. I'm going to tell you right now, do not do that because I think you will inevitably feel disappointed. There are things that feel reminiscent to it that you can compare it, but to say like, it's just as good or it's, again, it's one of the defining movies of the last century. So I don't think that's a good idea. But it's got a lot of great things going for it. And I really liked it a lot. And, it's one of my favorite movies this year. So I recommend it.